Hey, Carly, thanks for having me. Paulo Machado. Um, I'm a human being who's on a journey to kind of do some personal self-discovery and hopefully have a positive impact on people's lives along the way. Been very focused on healthcare for over 25 years now. What I love to do is to spend my time helping people who are also focused on having a positive impact on people and the planet. I help them design, develop, and commercialize solutions that have some kind of a positive social impact.
Hello, beautiful people. My name is Carly, and I am the founder and host here at Machutine. Machutine is a brand new media and community network serving bright future innovation. Through sharing knowledge, stories, and wisdom, our YouTube channel is meant to help you connect more profoundly with a wide array of bright future leaders, bright future ideas, and most importantly, your own bright future vision. We would love to have you join us, and to get involved, I'll give you 3 easy ways that you can go ahead and do that right now. First, click on that subscribe button so that you don't miss a beat. Second, follow our Crowdcast page, which is in the link below this video, to participate in all of our upcoming virtual workshops and events. Third, I encourage you to connect with the guests in these episodes, follow their work, and let them inspire you beyond the video. All of their links are also below. I've found over the years that when it comes to the future, we often ask, where do you think we're going? But we rarely ask, where would you like to go? This is the Reimagine the Future series, where I talk to subject matter experts and futurists about what future they would like to create and what small actions we can take today that might change our future trajectory.
If I could reimagine the future of healthcare, this is what I would like to see.
I think we need to, as a global human community, revisit the concept of healthcare and really shift the focus and the culture to become much more focused on human thriving and health and well-being. Right now, at least from a U.S.-centered perspective, which is where I spend most of my time trying to solve the problems here, it's just an industry. There's a lot of components that we've built out, basically, for simplicity's sake, to execute on delivering health and well-being from a very acute perspective. We don't really focus on the mind. We don't really focus on how to develop human beings into fully functioning human beings, I should say, when they're young. So there's really not a cultural context for health and well-being and thriving.
Kind of expanded just to give us a little bit more of a concrete vision of, if you had to kind of see what that looks like, what would that, look like? How would healthcare, how would you see that shift happen? If we went out 50 years, what would you like it to tangibly look like?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different components of it. There's amazing emergent exponential technologies that are going to make a massive difference in what I call the pragmatic sides of health and well-being. So we could easily imagine, and everybody's out there talking about embedding sensors in your body, on your body, in your home, in your environment, and that would give you real-time feedback loops that improve your mental, emotional, and physical state. And we need all that, and there's no doubt about that. But I think it goes back to, and that's frankly much easier to imagine, and I think much easier to roll out, because that's what we're used to. Stuff, basically, that we can bring into our lives. And frankly, as you saw, even something as simple as a phone, this device came out a decade ago, and it's changed everything. For anyone who has one, it changes their state of mind. And it clearly affects their health and well-being on many different levels. Lots of studies show that. So it really goes back to, I think, the heavy lifting to me is just creating a cultural context that shifts to what I was referring to earlier, changes the whole dialogue, that it's not about all the stuff. The stuff is nice, and that enables success at a different level, clearly. But it's really about frame of reference and how do we create a cultural context for that health and well-being. So that starts, frankly, with the leadership at the local, regional, and national level, so that we're all aligned around how to prioritize our investments in human thriving. Just not for us only, but also for our planet, because we can't thrive on a planet that's barren and doesn't allow us to live on it anymore. So just creating a context where you're acknowledging that you are who you are, that you have basic human needs, aligning around those needs, focusing our resources on human well-being, family well-being, tribal well-being, all things that we don't really spend a lot of time facilitating. It's kind of left up to individuals to figure it out for themselves, and some do just fine, but the majority don't thrive in that environment where it's a very laissez-faire, unstructured. So I think of in the balance, and there is, by the way, there is no perfect health and well-being system in the world. I haven't seen one. I've studied a lot of them around the world. But there are places where that worldview, where they prioritize human well-being ahead of short-term material gains, for instance, to a higher degree. So look at some of the Scandinavian countries where they've set into context a strong culture of human thriving from a physical well-being perspective, mental well-being perspective, educational well-being perspective, security, and there's just more consistency and fairness across the culture, that everybody is protected and cared for. People feel that versus in a situation where, for example, the US and many other countries, it's much more you're on your own. Figure it out. You don't make it, you failed. That's your problem. And it's not really around, okay, culture and context matters. And most things that happen in life aren't something you have control over. Some people would tell you there's nothing you have real control over in your life, depending on how extreme, who the speaker is you're talking to. But that's the perception of that control that seems to matter.
Great. And what is in your, let's see, what is the better question I want to ask? So I'm hearing a lot, we can add all the things, all the gadgets, right? Read our blood pressure and this and shift this about your life. Again, take a very tech thing, physical perspective on how to fix healthcare. But if it is more of the cultural story, what do you think, what questions, what do you think people can do right now that can start to shift that story for them, even if it's on the individual or from an investor, just whatever comes to mind for you on kind of a small change that's easy today that might have an effect on that cultural shift?
Yeah, I think it really, frankly, starts with increasing self-awareness and just choosing to live an intentional life and paying attention to what are your needs. Are they being met? Are you compassionate about what you're doing to yourself as you interact with yourself and the people around you? You have the ability to have empathy, to create better connectivity with others, building all those kind of basic muscles that we tend to in our culture. Again, speaking to the US culture, we tend to overlook and or ignore those and have designed away from those things, actually, in many ways, shapes and form, because of those emerging tech gadgets that we talked about earlier. I think it's interesting because even when we develop our technologies to improve that human thriving, we don't tend to specifically state that in a way that fits in the context of what success looks like. For most people, when you look at success, especially in the startup world and large companies, success is measured in dollars and cents and stuff. And that's okay. It just leaves a tremendous amount of negative impact on everyone else who's not successful, right? There's not a lot of compassion or empathy for second place or ever bit third or fourth or anything after that. We just don't celebrate the journey. We celebrate the destination, and the destination is not measured in a way that's kind of compassionate.
Definitely. Great. Okay. And would you like to share anything about current projects? Anything you'd like to speak to? Okay, go.
Absolutely, sure. For the last 12 years or so, I've set up my own company to basically help startups figure out how to do what I mentioned: design, develop, and commercialize solutions. And at any point in time, I've got a half dozen really interesting projects going on. Some of the things I'm focused on right now are really focused on the mind and mental well-being. Specifically, social isolation and loneliness is at the top of the heap in terms of the attention I'm giving it right now. It's a massive epidemic across the country and world. Interestingly, it links back to what we just talked about a minute ago, all these emerging, interesting, exciting technologies, phones, social media, and tons of other tools, binge watching Netflix, have all basically created separations, opportunities to separate from each other. And we are social animals. That's well known, well understood, well studied. One of the best forms of torture there is isolation. And people do not do well when they're not connected to other human beings, when there's not a sense of true, meaningful, empathic connection to other human beings. We tend to thrive when those relationships exist in our emerging tech. And the way we've structured our society has basically made our relationships with people very transactional. So I can, eat alone and order it and not know who the person was that delivered it or cooked it. Tastes great, immediately gratifying in the moment, meets that need. But there's that whole breaking bread with people around the table thing that we evolved as a tribe, where we have this need to connect with people in a meaningful way. And one of the companies I'm working on is trying to address that issue. So it's really exciting and interesting. We're trying to use the emerging technology that exists to actually reverse the tide that we've unleashed by all these really exciting exponential technologies. Just for a frame of reference and context, it's interesting that we develop these technologies and just unleash them into the world. So, for instance, there was not a study that said, "Okay, we're going to launch an iPhone. Let's do a multi-year randomized controlled trial to see what the impact is on people of having a tool like this in their hand," or Facebook when it was launched, or any other tool or solution that was launched into the market. We don't do studies like we do with drugs or devices, where we actually test them in human beings to see if they do harm before we go ahead and figure out what the right dosage is. So imagine a dosing schedule for Facebook that we can actually administer to just give you just enough Facebook or social media or phone use or whatever that doesn't cause you mental, physical, and emotional harm. But we don't think that way. It would be interesting to kind of use that frame of reference as we develop these exponential technologies that are going to even be more impactful, frankly, because some of the things I see come across my hands in the last decade are just mind-blowing in terms of what they could do to us, to the point where we actually don't even look or feel like humans anymore. We'll be able to genetically adjust ourselves. But the company I'm working with is focused on isolation and loneliness. What we do is we work with the health infrastructure that exists today. They are trying to turn the tide on the mental health and well-being of people. They realize that it is an epidemic. It's increasing their costs. So they're looking for creative solutions to get people back together again. So to deal with isolation and loneliness and create meaningful relationships. So it's a really novel idea. The founder basically had the idea of like, why don't we get people together over things they're passionate about? So activity clubs, biking, hiking, dancing, you name it. There's over 100 of them we've cataloged across the U.S. right now. Some incredibly diverse and interesting ones. And the bottom line is we match people into these activity clubs. They form friendships over things that they're very passionate about, and that those passions keep them together. So you create meaningful long-term relationships around these passions. Mm-hmm. In the past, we've had other ways to do that, but the technologies that have emerged have replaced a lot of that face-to-face connection. We're leveraging matching tools and algorithms and technology to get people into these clubs and help keep them in those clubs. And obviously the health system that exists today is very unaware of these activities, typically, and are very happy to become informed and connected to bringing those activities to their members and patients. So it's been really exciting. Some of this innovation, by the way, is being made possible by this shift to value-based care delivery models from fee-for-service. And the government's leading the way on this, and Center for CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, is in the process of basically pushing hard to drive reimbursement for value-based care, and specifically around mental health and well-being and social determinants of health issues. Things like isolation and loneliness, things like food insecurity, housing insecurity, transportation issues, things that you would never think of in the past as health-related issues, or more of a public service, so to speak. But since a lot of that is now shifting to the private sector, they're launching these types of programs as an offering from an insurance company. So it's been really exciting to kind of blaze new trails to provide solutions for isolation and loneliness. I mean, it's not something people shop for. It's not like saying, "Gee, I'm lonely and isolated. I'm going to go fix that problem, and here's like an app for that or something." but it is a fundamental human need. So that's really exciting. Also working on some other things that are focused on, it's pretty diverse. So mental health and well-being in other ways, that's anxiety, depression, measuring emotional states with some really interesting VR and AR technology that's emerging, doing better cancer diagnostics, and connecting cancer patients in third world countries into U.S. academic cancer centers that can actually provide some diagnosis and teleconsulting across borders, which is really intriguing. Working on some other implantable sensor devices that use sound to do diagnosis. So, and the list goes on, but there's just some really interesting emerging tech stuff that's out there that's mind-blowing. Some of the more intriguing ones actually allow us to edit our genetics, basically, and help us be better at the genetic level, which makes a lot of people nervous. But it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So I'd rather keep my finger on the pulse there and see that the right people are doing it versus for the wrong reasons.
Definitely. Well, that gets back to what you were saying before, and it's funny. It came up in one of my passion areas, and has come up in many conversations lately. Is as we innovate, as the pace of innovation accelerates, we do need to start thinking more. Not every idea should be created, and we need to have better ways of testing what the human impact is going to be of a given innovation or change, because we've just been moving so. It's like, it makes me think of like little kids, right? When they like start moving around, and if you try to run too fast, they're just stumbling all over the place. And at a certain point, kind of having the discipline to go, okay, we need to have more reflection. We need to be thinking, talking, have more accountability and accountability for things that we're creating, and design some systems and regulations around testing those concepts.
It's great, and it's great to see some movement in this direction, frankly, to create a more ethical, human and humane-centered design and apply it to tech principles and emerging tech companies. A lot of conversations starting to occur in this space. Very hard to execute against because impact investors exist. They're clearly not the norm in the marketplace. Their ROI can be higher, but it's got to be careful which companies you pick. And at the end of the day, most LPs don't worry about impact investing when they're writing checks to these organizations. They're looking for quick turnarounds. We measure success by number of unicorns a fund invests in, not by how many people that they help thrive and live a better life. The ROI is too long, and people want their money, a return on their investment that they put in much faster than the typical social impact investment would look. We left it in the past. We used to leave this kind of stuff to governments to invest in those long-term cycles. We've been cutting back on what we consider things that government should be investing in. And so, things like education now become something that some private company should deal with. Things like housing. It's kind of interesting to watch. We used to have a housing department that would write checks to improve quality of housing for people, and that's kind of going away. And now hospital systems and insurance companies are writing checks to improve the quality of housing for people. Food insecurity. We're okay with cutting funding for food for kids, but then the insurance companies say, wow, sick kids who don't eat, that costs me money. So now I've got to figure out how to feed these kids. So it's an interesting shift. I'm curious to see where kind of the balance is, or if the pendulum swings too far. Because at the end of the day, those programs are only going to be effective if there's a profit attached to them, because those companies focus on quarterly earnings statements. So if providing housing and feeding kids becomes not profitable, then those companies will stop offering those benefits.
Right.
A little disturbing when you think about it from that perspective.
Yeah. All right. Closing at this moment in time, if there's a mantra, a quote, a personal quote, or whatever words you would like to leave behind a bubble over your head to share with the world at this moment.
Sure. Well, I think it's be kind to yourself and others, set intentions that align with that, do the work, be curious, have empathy, and just be okay with the fact that we don't have control. If things don't go the way we want, that's okay. So equanimity is really important. just as important, if not more important, than some of the other things we just talked about. Because without it, it's really hard to be kind and compassionate. So these things are all kind of interwoven. Mm-hmm. Just important to be thinking about it holistically and living an intentional life. Just being aware that these things matter, and it enables you to kind of go off and have positive relationships with other human beings in your personal and professional life.